every angle. This is Arise America.
Now, Russia has hurled its military might against Ukrainian cities and towns and poured more troops into the war, seeking to slice the country in two in a potentially pivotal battle for control of the eastern industrial heartland of coal mines and factories. The fighting unfolded along a boomerang-shaped front hundreds of miles long in what is known as the Donbass. In Mariupol, the devastated port city in the Donbass, Ukrainian troops say the Russian military dropped heavy bombs to flatten what was left of a sprawling steel plant believed to be the defenders' last holdout, and hit a hospital where hundreds were staying. Well, for the latest, let's cross live now to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Rise US Correspondent Eric Ham. Eric, as always, good to see you. Now, what's the latest with the new round of military aid coming from the United States?
Yeah, we just got some more information about this, Dan. What we're seeing here is already, remember last week, the White House announced an additional $800 million. The president announced that when he had a phone call with Ukraine's President Zelensky, and now today we're now learning that an additional $800 million in military aid will be going to Ukraine. Now, this comes on the heels of, we know, President Biden meeting with leaders from the West just yesterday. He met with a series of leaders in a secure virtual meeting that included both the the Prime Minister of UK, as well as other leaders including the head of the EU Council and NATO. And now today, the president is announcing this $800 million in aid. Now, we do not know the details of what will be in this next package, but what we do know is, once again, the Ukrainians are running low on supplies, and we know they are still hoping that they can get air fighter jets that would make, they believe, that would actually create a greater level of equality in this ongoing battle. But right now, what we're seeing is that there is a greater sense of urgency as the reset by Russia continues with a massive onslaught in the eastern region of Ukraine.
Now, I know President Biden has been meeting with his defense team. Apart from the extra funding, do we know any more?
Yeah, in fact, that meeting is actually scheduled to take place about an hour from right now. We know the president will be meeting with his defense secretary as well as the Joint Chiefs. And of course, these conversations will certainly be at the top of the list. We know earlier today, the Secretary of Defense has been really busy. He had a phone call with his counterpart from China. In addition to that, he met with his counterpart from Poland as well. We know in that phone call with his counterpart from China, they discussed a range of issues, including U.S.-China defense relations, but also the ongoing invasion by Russia into Ukraine. Now, these are conversations that we know that are happening at all levels of the government, including at the top with President Biden and President Xi speaking about 4 or 5 weeks ago. But also we know that other high-level officials, from the National Security Advisor to the Secretary of Defense, have been meeting with their counterparts in China. And we know one of the reasons for that is that even though both nations are still locked in very tense relations right now, they both believe that it is paramount that they maintain lines of communication between the two. And the United States wants to make sure that China stays on the sideline. Again, there are reports that Russia had reached out to China seeking material support as this war was not going well for Russia. And so clearly the United States wants to ensure that China stays and remains on the sidelines. So we know those negotiations and conversations are still ongoing. And also the Defense Secretary meeting with his counterpart from Poland, which we're now learning that Poland today in that meeting, in the pool spray before it actually began in closed-door session, announced that they would also be sending an additional round of military aid to Ukraine as well.
Now, I understand that Russia have tested a new nuclear-capable missile. It's understood that the Pentagon have said this is not a threat. Do we know any more?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, we're told that the United States was aware that Russia had been planning this missile, and that they had been planning to actually test the missile. So the United States does not see this as any great escalation in the ongoing war in Ukraine. However, Russia, but there is the thinking that this was seen as perhaps attempts to be provocative, given that the United States continues to be aggressive in providing Ukraine with military aid. Remember, at least we know of at least 4 shipments that arrived in Ukraine over this past weekend, and 7 additional shipments actually made it to the ground also later yesterday as well. So clearly, an enormous amount of aid going in, and Russia has made clear that they will begin targeting this military aid from the United States and other Western nations.
Just one more question out before you go. Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, walked out of the G20 meeting of finance ministers early, and so did ministers or officials from France, the UK and Canada. I mean, could we see more action here with the G20, or could we even see a G20 split happening?
Anything is quite possible at this time, Dan. We do know that this is something that has been discussed for quite some time. In fact, there were calls from the United States and other Western nations that Russia needed to be suspended from the G20. In fact, it certainly makes sense given right now where Russia's economy is, given the fact that these sanctions have continued to cripple the economy, so much so that we're told that the value of its economy has actually lost between 15 and 20% since these sanctions have gone into place. And also, we are told that additional sanctions are expected to happen in the coming weeks as well.
Well, Eric, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for your analysis this evening. Eric Ham, Rise US Correspondent from Washington.
Every angle. This is